Hi everyone, I'm Erica Smith from Highfurlong School, and I thought I would share some of the top tips that I've had with experience and speaking to other supported schools about how really we can support those learners with those higher needs within our SEND settings. The first one I would say is to make sure that we keep the content varied of whatever it is that we're sending home, whether that be physical or online resources. I know if you think about a typical day, how many different documents, videos, content we give to our students. I think it's really important that we make sure that we continue to send a variety of work home as we would if we were in the classroom. Something else which I think has become apparent from ourselves as adults learning at home is the length of the activity. So we know that when you're attending remotely, it can be hard to maintain your concentration. So it's thinking, are we expecting our students to be online for a full 45 minutes for an hour? Or are we going to do maybe a 5-10 minute introduction? Then I know some settings switch their remote learning platform off, and then they will come back for the plenary. So it's about knowing your students and thinking, actually, how long would I hold their attention within the classroom? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to create a similar experience as we can whilst working from home. So it's being really mindful that we don't expect our students to attend just for an hour's lesson, because actually how much of that is going to be meaningful learning. I think it's important to mix up which faces our pupils are seeing as well. We all know that when working with pupils with SEND, a lot of those activities and achievements really based on successful relationships and positive relationships that we have with our students. So I think, you know, during the day they might come into contact with a one-to-one, with a HLTA, with a teacher, with a variety of teachers. And I think it's trying to, where possible, and I think that is one advantage that maybe we do have in a specialist provision, is that we do have a higher ratio of staffing for obvious reasons. And I think it's really important that actually if they've got a TA that they are really have a great relationship with, then it's important during that period of remote learning to still have access to those spaces for that reassurance. I've put a picture on here of our school because we were awarded last year the Happiest Secondary School Award. And I know that the students enjoy seeing a variety of faces. Even now we're working in these bubbles, they still enjoy seeing different faces walk down the corridor, even if it's just waving from afar. And on the other side of that is obviously if we know that there are certain times where maybe a student and a teacher, there might be a bit of clash of personalities. If you think that if that student was working remotely and was only seeing that face for 2 weeks, it might be quite hard to engage them and keep them motivated. So I think it really is essential that they see a variety of different faces. I know from our experience we've had, it might be that a TA might read a story or do an icebreaker activity, just to kind of give that change of face and voice. Flipped learning. I think flipped learning is great for pupils with SEND because actually it's about, for anyone that isn't aware of flipped learning, it's giving the pre-taught content in advance before your live session. So for students who maybe have got ASD, who have anxiety, maybe if they just need more processing time, having that information to replay back as many times as they need before coming together as a group in that live activity means that when you are together as a group, that time can be spent on exploring, clarifying that pupils have understood the activity, applying knowledge and giving that feedback, which I think the feedback is really important when learning remotely, because obviously it's not as instant as when we're in the classroom. So I really like the flipped learning where you're sending that content. So it could be a video, it could be a piece of information, you know, any piece of information in advance, allowing the pupils to work through it or question it, and then bring those questions to the live session. I think that's really good. Physical work packs and sensory activities. From a lot of the special schools that I've spoken to through the demonstrator project, they have found for those real complex learners with those higher needs, sending work packs home was more appropriate during the first lockdown. I think a lot of parents requested physical work packs, and I think sometimes for people to send, completing a pack, it shows like a completed task. So I think that is really useful, and it's not as much as we all champion technology, especially obviously in the demonstrator project. For some pupils, it's not the right approach all the time. So I think it's really important to have a real mix of those physical resource and sensory packs as well. One teacher who I spoke to who has just done, her bubble had been in lockdown, and she said something that she found was, and it wasn't her, sorry, I apologise, her bubble wasn't in lockdown, she had a child isolated, and she said actually she had them join live within the classroom, and she said I put the iPad at the table and treated it like the child was in the room. So actually I would make a point of referring and including them for input just like they were in the classroom. I know a specialist college I've been working with, and they were the same. They had them joined in, and they were asking them to show the work when they completed it, just as if they were in the classroom. So I think that's really key to making that learner feel valued and included within the group. One feedback we got from the school was that actually it was real, they'd noticed a real difference when students had that engaging learning environment, having a dedicated space to sit and work with minimum disruption. It made it much more easy for them to participate online within the activity, as opposed to students who were maybe sat on their bed and surrounded by their toys and were easily distracted. And obviously we know that most children in that situation, with or without a learning need, would be easily distracted if they were sat on the bed surrounded by their toys. So having that clear workspace, which is what we would encourage in the classroom, isn't it? That we would try and remove as many unnecessary distractions as possible. And that's just the same for if they're working at home. I thought this was a really nice one, is that allowing time to socialise. We've had a couple of bubbles been sent home since September, and actually our teachers have said that having that time at the beginning of the session, or having an additional session just for, you know, socialising, just to play a game or have a conversation, have a chat, is really important, because so much of the effects of the home learning, obviously our students were missing out on seeing their friends and that socialisation. So having that time at the beginning of the lesson, it just meant that everybody was in a better place to learn once they'd had those needs met and had that chance to catch up with their friends and their classmates and their teachers. This is one I feel really strongly about, is having access to as many resources at home as we would be using within school. I mean, if you think during just one lesson, the amount of resources, whether it be for computer access, whether it might be for communication, whether it might be for a visual impairment or to help read easier, so we would modify it by enlarging our documents. These are the things I think within the school setting that we take for granted, but actually can be the difference between a student accessing a piece of work at home and not. So I think as much as possible, it's about making sure that parents have got access to those resources. If they don't know how to use them, we need to do the quick guide on, you know, a really simple guide to how to use it, because I think we take it for granted that we use things all the time within school, and we've used them for years. And suddenly if you send maybe a joystick home for a parent or a rollable, I think it would be quite difficult to kind of help them to feel comfortable with that without any kind of support guide. So it's about making sure that students have got access to as much as possible, and it's not always possible to, you know, to send expensive pieces of equipment home, but are we creating plenty of visual resources for students learning at home? And this one I think is really, really interesting. I spoke to a college last week, and they were saying that they had 100% of their parents had signed up, and she really attributed their success to the fact that she had quite, she put some rules in place quite early on with her parents that, you know, she agreed she wouldn't be messaging them, she wouldn't be emailing them on a Sunday. They'd had a bit of an agreement drawn up that actually if she did contact them on a Sunday, it would be for an emergency for the next morning, but actually it was putting those boundaries in place and being aware of what we're asking of our parents and carers. So it would, another thing that the tutor was quite keen on was she made it as easy as possible. So rather than asking them to sign up on Teams and do this on Zoom, and they had their learning platform and the work was on there, and she would dial in the student or the parent, depending if the parent was accessing it on their account for them, that they would dial in for that lesson. It wasn't for the parent to then go into their emails and then to click on a meeting and all those things that can be a bit of a barrier to the lesson. She tried to remove as many barriers as possible. So she would just be dialing in the parent or student in real time, and the work would be set. And actually she found that parents, because they only had they were using Seesaw, because all their work was in one place, they were only looking for one method, one platform to check on. They weren't checking on their social media and then their emails and then on Teams. She found that they were sending work back in real time during the live lesson, which I think is fantastic. So apologies if you are already doing these things already. Even if you just take one or two of them away, I hope it was useful. I think we're just very aware that for students with higher needs, it is extremely difficult for them and their parents to be working remotely. So if a couple of these things can make that a little bit easier, and feel free to use it as a bit of an audit if you're thinking about how you are supporting parents with remote learning. Feel free to contact me. My email address is erica.smith@highfurlong.blackpool.sch.uk. I have to thank the fantastic teachers who have given me input from Highfurlong School. They've been doing live lessons, remote learning for a while now, and they had some great tips, and I think that was really valuable, and I hope you find it useful. If you would like to see any of our other webinars, our YouTube channel is listed above. And if you would like support, free support for your school or setting from the Demonstrator School project, please sign up at www.edtech.ribblesdale.org/demonstrator/. Thank you very much.